Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. Count down to death. I stared at the wall with half-lidded eyes and gulped. My breath was hoarse and croaky, my throat dry and absent of hydration. My hands trembled uncontrollably, scrambling for the cheap chalk, even though my eyes never once graced the sight of the white stick. My exhales were never rhythmic, constantly choking on the air as I mentally tried to inhale and exhale at the same time. I looked at every line drawn individually, memorizing what each meant to every detail of the messy scratch. There drawn were tallies, 42 singular ones, 8 full ones, with 2 to spare, to be exact. Each resembled each day I was kept here, in this hell. And they were slowly counting down to the inevitable release. I had 3 more weeks to fully understand my limited time here. My eyes suddenly widened as I let out a scream of terror, a scream that my fellow prisoners were very accustomed to. A scene of trauma washed over my eyes and sent my body crashing down onto the floor in pure fear. A sense of panic overwhelmed me, and my body began to sweat. All my movements henceforth were uncontrollable and predicted by the past. My emotions were painfully drowned by regretful memories that I begged to forget. I could only watch as my gravest mistake haunted me once again. "Paulette!" a gruff voice called, alerting me and distracting me from my duties. Paulette Ann Hadley. That's me. Short blue hair and matching piercing eyes. I'd dream about how they held the essence of the pure sky. But those thoughts were the only fantasies that I used to distract me from the life that I dreaded so much. Then again, I was very far from pure, even before the incident. "Paulette!" they shouted again after only a few seconds of waiting. Impatient as always, incompetent as always, the voice belonged to my master, the Earl of Daventry, Sir Peter Holmes, a sorrowful old man who spent his seemingly endless days laying in his bed or sat in his office, scoffing his face with the fatty meals the chefs were forced to cook to fulfill his never-ending stomach. He ate his feelings. I'd feel sorry for him if he weren't such a bastard. "Paulette!" he screeched for the 3rd time, all in the span of 20 seconds, so loud that I saw the family of mice that lived in the corner of the laundry room scurry across the dusty cobblestone floors in fright. I rolled my eyes in frustration and slapped the grungy old rag I used to clean the counter into the rusty steel sink. I tightened my apron, and smoothed out the traditional maid's dress, all while cursing to myself in irritation. My uniform was nothing out of the ordinary for a low-classed maid like myself. Black and white, all the way through, of course. A short black dress with a white apron, white stockings, and black buckled shoes. I hurried up the grand staircase of the large Daventry estate, my feet thanking me for gifting them of a different surface to stand on that wasn't rough, uneven stone. Luscious carpet was certainly a lovely change from grubby concrete. Reaching my master's doors was something I was always dreaded because of what lay on the other side. I pressed a hand against the shiny wood, recently dusted and glossed by yours truly. The smooth touch of the spruce was nice against my sore and worn fingertips. Master, I greeted with a sickly sweet tone, a forced smile painting my features. I could almost feel my left eye twitch in pent-up hatred. "Paulette!" he roared, his voice deep and gravelly. He was laid down on his satin sheets that held many empty plates and cups from the meals I had brought since this morning. They were already piling up. This sight was nothing new to me. This is what I spent my life's work on. This is what drove me insanity. A plate mounted with Victoria sponge cake rested on his rising and falling stomach. Oh, how I wanted to rip it open. "Yes, master?" I repeated, my voice bearing the same bittersweetness as every phrase that escaped my lips directed to my mortifying master. "I don't pay you to lounge around. I have been waiting for hours," he scolded, only to choke on a strawberry that had been layered between the sponge. Bits of red fruit spewed out into the air and dirtied the satin sheets with spit and berry. I cringed at the sight, but tried to contain the look because of the presence of my judgmental master. I enjoyed watching him struggle. "I was just finishing up the washing, master," I responded simply, never giving him the gift of eye contact. "I don't care what you were doing," he snapped with a snarl. "Clean up this mess. I am lying in filth. Hurry up, woman." He turned to his side, without giving a care about the plate that slid off his bloated stomach and smudged jam onto the expensive emerald. "Clean me up too," he ordered, with his own ugly, toothy cringe, showing off grimy yellow teeth. I rolled my shoulders backwards and relaxed my joints in a desperate attempt to contain my rage. I took 3 deep breaths through clenched teeth and slowly walked over to my master, my anger increasing with every step. I piled the empty plates into stacks and balanced them on my forearms to get the task done in one go and get away from my master as soon as possible. My muscles tensed under the weight of so much weight and sent my body to lean forward uncontrollably and my face to squish into the duvet. This would be a simple, clumsy topple to anyone but myself. Due to the superiority complex my master harbored, a deathly scream was sent sounding around the master bedroom. "Paulette, how dare you assault me like this?" He shrieked like a toddler as he pulled away from my body, as if I were a parasite. I gulped, my body pulsing with overwhelming fury. My breaths became hollow and uneven, my lungs aching at the lack of oxygen I provided. Sorry, I stuttered, my voice dipping from a forced sweetness to a deep sarcasm. A sore cough followed my words, and a ripple crawled up my spine like a wave of violent anxiety washing over me without placing my eyes upon it. My fingertips grazed the blade of a knife covered in grease. My eyes widened, and all of a sudden, my movements were prioritized over my thoughts. My grip tightened on the kitchen knife, the sharp blade digging into my finger's flesh and drawing blood. The red liquid sunk into the satin and stained the fabric. But that was no problem, as lots more blood was soon to follow after. I let out a whimper as pain soared through my nerves. But I paid no matter. My only mind's focus was on the man who stared at me in confusion and growing anger. I couldn't care less about his emotions, because they soon morphed into ones of pain and shock as I stabbed the tip of the knife into his belly. I pulled my hand off the blade and smeared my blood onto his naked stomach. I subconsciously let out a joyful yelp at the sight of his blood mixing with mine and creating an uncomfortable solution of growing red. I pressed my uninjured hand against the wooden handle of the knife and pushed the blade further into my master's stomach. I hastily pulled out the deadly weapon and plunged it back into his stomach. Blood splattered onto my dress, onto the bed, and onto my face. I repeated this sequence several times, the knife constantly going in and out of the body and splashing blood. With every cut, more blood seeped and deepened the stain on my usually perfectly clean apron. My face was now smeared in the metallic-smelling liquid and was dripping down my chin as if I were slurping soup, but missed my mouth. Master died after just a few stabs due to bleeding out and contagious infection. But that didn't stop my excitement. I sliced as much flesh as I could, covering as much surface area as I could, and slathering it with fresh, pungent blood. I made sure not to leave any area untouched with my bubbling rage. My lips twitched as a laugh escaped my throat, choking on itself and departing in the form of an evil cackle. I doubled down in laughter as pure ecstasy ran through my veins. I bounced on the expensive bed and headed towards the limp head of my master. I swiftly sliced the knife across my master's throat and admired the way sickly liquid swam down his wrinkled neck and ran down his chest like separating rivers. That blood quickly melded with that of his stomach and made a pool that looked like it had originated from the depths of hell itself. I twirled on the bed, never minding my steps that prodded into my master's corpse. The authorities arrived before I had taken my leave, and I was seized before I could flee. I was captured before I could even reminisce my actions. I was taken to Egan prison and remained there till my death. 3 months, to be exact. It was not a natural death, but a chosen one, confirmed by those who didn't even know me. I let out a gasp as the walls of my cell reappeared around me, and the touch of the cold concrete floor returned to my fingertips. My eyes widened as I took sight of the clean wall in front of me. They were gone. My tallies were gone. I let out a cough and a choke. "Help! Help!" I screamed, throwing myself at the wall and slamming a fist upon it in distress. "They're gone. They're gone. Who did this?" I demanded, punching the wall and watching blood draw my knuckles and splatter onto the gray. "Your day has come, Hadley. You're finally free." A voice mused, their tone echoing throughout my secluded cell. "What?" I gaped, blinking like a confused dog. "Free? Well, free from life, of course." They chuckled maliciously, taunting me with their freedom. I chose not to turn towards the guard that addressed me so rudely. My eyes continuously trained on the blank wall in front of me. I have a few more weeks. I don't want to die. I cried out, tears brimming my eyes and blurring my vision. Should have thought about that before you killed a man. The guard glared, pulling open the door of my cell and approaching me with handcuffs. I pressed my back against the wall, but there was no escaping death. I was quickly seized and yanked down the hallway, past my fellow death row inmates. I hung my head low, hair shadowing my eyes and creating an eerie effect. My breaths were loud as anxiety built up inside of me, a panic attack approaching at a tremendous speed that I wished to slow down. I stumbled over my footing several times, each one getting more clumsy and emotional. By now, tears were streaming down my cheeks and creating thin lines of cleanliness that contrasted with the dirt and grime that littered my flesh. I did nothing to stop the loud sobs that slipped through my trembling and muttering lips, weeping as dread and hysteria flowed through every pore. We soon reached a standstill where I was forced into a chair. I stared into vicious brown eyes that reflected my own teary ones. They held no sympathy or remorse, just a simple hue of cheek. I inhaled and exhaled harshly, every breath increasing in volume, mass, and sound. Leather-worn straps were tightened over my wrists and ankles, and a rusty metal brace was placed firmly at my temples. Fear soared through my veins like rockets. I pulled and struggled against my restraints that were quickly cutting off my blood flow. I let out screams for mercy, but they went unheard. "Let me go. Please. It's not my time. I have weeks. I can't die," I wailed, shaking my head violently in a weak attempt to get rid of the brace that held me so firmly. A loud slap sounded throughout the dimly lit room. My head was thrown to the side, and a pulsing sting was sent flaring at my right cheek. My pleads and sobs ceased. Just a quiet whimper left in its place as a final emotion of sorrow took its toll. "Shut it, woman," a guard hissed. "Paulette Ann Hadley, you are sentenced to death via electrocution for the murder of Sir Peter Holmes on January 16th, 1898. Do you have any last words?" Another guard recited, his tone bearing no sincerity whatsoever. I took a deep breath, lifting my gaze and meeting his to dramatize my following words. A scowl was painted at my lips, and furrowed eyebrows of anger took over my features. He deserved it. I growled with nothing but rage in my voice, a pull at the lever, and a crackle of wiring. Electricity was sent pulsing through my brain and sparked an agony that tore scream after scream from my dry throat. Quickly, my mind was sent spiraling into the endless dark abyss known as death, the disappearance of Elizabeth Conway. Elizabeth Conway, reported missing on the 18th of November, 1986. 5'5", slender build, brown hair, and green eyes. Last seen leaving school premises on the 13th of November at roughly 1600, wearing her school uniform, white shirt, navy blazer, tie, and tights. A double-breasted brown overcoat with white buttons, and a black woolly hat. First missing persons report of the victim. No previous criminal record. No records of mental illnesses. No reports of family conflict. No records of conflict at school. So, no reason to run away, thought the inspector, as he meticulously read over her profile, line by line, taking a long drag of his cigarette in between. No suspects, no trails, and no trace of the missing girl. The only lead, a Nikon F3 SLR, with a large crack streaking across its lens. There was nothing special about the camera itself. In any ordinary case, one would suspect nothing of a broken camera under a shedding oak tree hidden in a pile of leaves. They'd tut and shake their head at the thought of an inconsiderate litterer leaving a trail of rubbish without a speck of care for the environment. Even to the inspector, it would be meaningless litter, except it was found near the route Elizabeth would take to get home from school. Through the entrance nearest to the duck pond, to feed them the crusts from her sandwiches she refused to eat. Past the fields of goal posts where the local Sunday league teams would train. Through the heavily wooded area where the owls and squirrels nested, before reaching the exit next that led to the local pub, where she would find her house on the end of the road. Yet, even passing places that would often be swarming with people, witnesses, the girl seemed to have vanished without a trace. Perhaps it was his intuition and expertise that made him question the worth of the camera. Or perhaps it was his desperation to solve the case without a single suspect or lead that made him hold on to a false sense of hope. Whichever it was, he allowed himself the hint of a smile at the result of trusting his judgment as he swept his eye across the photos that hung across the dark room. The photos of the girl who had disappeared without a trace. The constable stood in disbelief at the first lead in the impossible case. Had it not been for the countless nights of sleep he lost in desperate search of a clue. And now he held on to the clue in his hands as he would his own child. It was heavy. It came with a neck strap, noticeable if she had dropped it. Clearly, it was discarded on purpose. What could the girl have seen that made her throw away such an exquisite bit of kit? He wondered. One by one, the two closely analyzed each scene from the roll of 400 films, searching for the pieces of the puzzle that was hidden within. Seems like we may have our first few suspects. The constable held the print under a blood crimson tint that dimmed across the dark room. He streaked his hands over the two girls, one who seemed tanned recently from the Mediterranean, with bright blonde hair, throwing a frisbee to the other with silky black hair, who seemed to fix a jealous gaze towards a boy that lay next to Elizabeth on a picnic blanket. Her had grazing his wavy brown hair. The photo had been taken in the same park Elizabeth passed through on the way to school. The inspector's hunch was correct. There had to be a clue within the photos, as few as there may have been on the roll. These three seemed to appear in a lot of these photos, especially this lad here. Suspects, maybe. The inspector spoke with a tone of sarcasm. Or perhaps, constable, a concept you may not be familiar with. They are her friends? The constable growled in disapproval, unable to reply with a witty comeback, as he continued to shake his head at the photos. I don't know, Inspector. There's just something quite off about these photos, as if something isn't right in these pictures. Though he rolled his eyes at the constable's intuition, or rather, his lack of, he could not help but agree as he continued to analyze the other photos. Some, like the one the inspector had pointed out, were of her in the park, the location they suspected of her last whereabouts. The photo at the end of the wash line caught his eye more than the others. The photo of the girl walking away into the wooded area. He could not explain the cold shiver that flooded his body. Perhaps it was the faded glow around her, casting an ominous shadow in the dark winter night. Perhaps it was the way she seemed to be descending into an abyss of darkness, never to be seen again, some by the school, seemingly at the start of the day, judging by the children heading towards the building, some by the front of her house, and a few in various random locations, such as cafes, restaurants, and cinemas. There seemed to be no pattern in the location, other than the fact Elizabeth didn't seem to travel very much, or very far, if these places she deemed worthy of photographing. Or perhaps, the inspector thought, there was a significance to these seemingly mundane locations. Either way, all these locations had previously been searched, revealing no trace of the girl. He noted the appearances of each new face he came across, analyzing body language between characters and secrets hidden behind each expression. He scanned each person in depth, as if he were questioning them in an interrogation. He knew, of course, that the basis of such assumptions would be no different to creating characters for a storybook. The balance of assumption and deduction was a fine line. Perhaps, he thought, there would be someone lurking within these photos, hidden away in the background, someone with a vengeful eye, waiting to kidnap poor unsuspecting Elizabeth. But he dared not suggest it to the constable, at least not yet. To suspect such a thing would escalate the case to a criminal investigation. From his experience, escalating a missing persons case turned out to have severe consequences for the person who was eventually found, dead or alive. He was somewhat relieved to find no such person lurking in the background. He took a step back and sharply exhaled a cloud of smoke in relief. He tilted his head and gathered his remarks, taking another drag of his cigarette. So far, only two things seemed to correlate with the photos. One being nothing more than a hunch. He could not quite place it, but there was something familiar about many of the views in the photos. Holding a photo in one hand and taking a hit of his cigarette in another. What was this sense of familiarity he felt? It was as if he had stood exactly where the photographer had. "It's strange," mumbled the constable. "Look at it in a certain way, and you could follow the girl's daily routine. Leave home, go to school, walk home through the park, hang out with friends. Seems like she goes through life in a hurry, judging by the blurriness of them all." The inspector grinned at the constable's remark. The quality of photography that went into the pictures was quite rushed and poorly taken. Aside from Elizabeth, the others in the pictures seemed distorted or blurry. Either the girl's skills were in dire need of improvement, or she was too consumed by her own vanity to focus on anything else in the photos, given that she was in every single photo. The latter was more likely, except she didn't seem to face the camera in any of the shots, his eyes fixed once again on the girl on her own, walking into the wooded area. "Tell me something," said the inspector, circling his head across the room. "What kind of photos would you take on your camera?" The constable raised an eyebrow, puzzled by the inspector's attempt at small talk. "Nice scenery, friends, family, pets, events, perhaps any special occasions I'd like to remember precisely. So my question is, out of a roll of 400 photos, given the cost of rolls and prints these days, why only take photos of yourself? And why such blurry ones?" The hum of electricity flowed through the dark room lights, as if the room, too, was anticipating the constable's answer. Could it be, he thought aloud, that the camera may not actually belong to Elizabeth? "I fear so, Constable. Now ask yourself this. The photos are blurry and poorly lit, possibly due to the zoom distorting the camera's focus, and due to the lack of flash used. So why are the photos so poorly captured? And why does everyone in the photos seem to be doing quite mundane activities?" The colors in the constable's face had suddenly bled dry as he deciphered the inspector's epiphany. "You mean to tell me you see it too now, don't you?" the inspector continued, masking the sense of dread he refused to succumb to. "It's not the people in the photos we're after, but the photographer himself." The inspector took the last drag of his cigarette, as if to signal the constable to brace himself for the impact of his next words. "A stalker." He closely narrowed his gaze at the photo at the end of the wash line, memorizing each of the minute details. "These are the photos taken by Elizabeth's stalker. It all adds up. They were taken from a distance, by someone who did not want to be noticed. Except..." The inspector's voice came to a ghostly whisper. "Except when he was..." His eyes shifted focus away from the missing girl and onto her shadow, as a look of terror took place of the once coy smile, as if he were watching it unfold on a theater screen. He pictured the girl stopping dead in her tracks as the accidental camera flash illuminated the bushes around her, which were once enveloped by the winter darkness. He pictured the girl gingerly turning her head towards, praying it was only a trick of the light, staring wide-eyed in horror at the silhouette next to the tree. He pictured the man livid at his mistake as he tossed the camera, the evidence, as his expression changed to the smolder of a predator in the wild who had been spotted by his prey. As he pounced forward to begin the desperate chase, the inspector pictured the horror in the girl's face, living out the fear of every woman alone and vulnerable in the dark, fluidly sprinting away from the danger, lungs too strained to scream for help. He pictured the girl pounding her legs on the path, desperate to gain distance, only to be tackled down onto the damp, frosty grass. He pictured her writhing and clawing out to escape the clutches of her attacker, only to be dragged into the pitch-black abyss of the winter evening. The constable darted towards the door, coming to a sudden halt by the inspector's sharp grasp. "Let go!" he demanded. "This is out of your jurisdiction now. This is now an abduction case." But the inspector only strengthened his grip on the constable, refusing to release him. "Do you even know who you are looking for? We have no suspects and no other leads. If you sound the alarm now, we may never get the girl back. That stalker would know we were after him, and who knows what he'd do to the girl. The longer we wait, the more likely we are to lose the girl. It's already been almost a week. If we wait any longer, as you said, who knows what this guy could do? We'll find him. We're so close. It's all in there," the inspector exclaimed, pointing to the photos. "The clues are all in there. I just know it. Somewhere in this puzzle of photos is our suspect." The constable barged the inspector to release himself from his grip. He flicked the light switch on as he began to storm out the door. His hand slammed the handle of the door as he came to a sudden stop. He held his breath and paused. He looked back at the photos hanging from the wash line. Slowly, he approached the image of the school hanging in the middle of the room. The inspector curiously watched the constable, who had his eyes transfixed on the photo he held. One by one, the constable took the photos off the wash lines and began to arrange them in order. The inspector was all but helpless to wonder what was running through the constable's mind. But he dared not utter a word as the constable ordered the photos row by row. The constable's mind raced with thoughts, frantically searching for the thing that would connect the pieces to solve this mystery. Searching for a connection that may not even exist. But he had to try, his hands shuffling, sliding and shifting through the mounts and mounts of images. Finally, the constable took a few steps back at the puzzle he had solved, each photo laid in what appeared to be an order of brightness. "They're taken through a specific route," he began. "Take a look at the lighting, the shadows, and the location." The inspector, at a loss from his amazement, traced his eyes along the wash line. He watched the girl emerge from her house at first light, then wander into the school as more daylight emerged. He watched her have lunch with her friends by the cafe near the schools and walk home in the rapidly dimming light of the winter evening. It was all there in the lighting. Based on the path the photographer seems to have taken, I'd say the photos are taken in the same order as some sort of delivery route. The inspector could not help but crack a smile at the constable's genius breakthrough. It was all laid out perfectly. The route seemed to begin somewhere on Elizabeth's Road, where her house was, then to her school, taking other routes near the cafes and shopping center, finally ending at the park, where he'd presumably end his shift. and watch the girl on her way home. The question is, who exactly would use a route like this? The inspector wondered. Solve the last piece of the puzzle, and we'll have our suspect. The milkman, perhaps? Unlikely, the constable answered. The milkman would be doing his route before anyone was up. A postman? Perhaps. But what would a postman be doing in a park? Surely someone would notice him hiding behind bushes and trees. An ice cream man could hide from his van. Never heard of anyone selling ice cream before school? Paperboy, again, what would he be doing in a park? The inspector dropped his head and clenched his fists in frustration. They were so close to finding their suspect. Both he and the inspector knew they had one chance at finding the suspect before the investigation became public, and before the abductor knew the police were after him. Before it would be too late for the girl. If it wasn't already, he lifted his arm to his mouth to take another drag of his cigarette. He growled in frustration as he realized he had already finished it. He needed another one badly. He needed to focus. He reached into his coat pocket and balanced the nib between his lips. The sweet cherry scent of the Marlboro had immediately begun to work its magic, even before lighting it. He took his lighter from his back pocket, but stopped dead as the flints sparked. His gaze focused on the photos once again. He knew there was something familiar about the views in the photos. He had stood exactly where the photographer had been standing. He had stood in front of the laundrette that stood opposite the cafe, stood by the bus stop near the school, and stood by the same tree in the park, all while taking the last few drags of his cigarettas before throwing the butt into the bin. "It's the bin man," he exclaimed. Drives around the houses and schools, then goes to the park to pick up the litter. "Of course," exclaimed the constable. "No one would suspect him hiding behind trees and bushes. Anyone would think he was only raking leaves or picking up litter. Anyone would think he was only doing his job." The inspector and constable nodded in unison. Both ran for their coats, darting out the door. They had their suspect, but there was no telling what he could have done to the girl. Both raced to the car and blared the siren, knowing it may have been too late to save the girl from the clutches of her stalker. Praying the worst had not yet succumbed to her, hoodwinked. The only thing worse than tracing a witness 5 years after is to find out he has forgotten all about the crime, or at least the bits that matter. But Detective Syed was no greenhorn. He smiled at the 19-year-old who was sitting across the table devouring his second plate of chicken kafriel. "So, is the chicken tangy enough?" "Yes, Detective." "Thank you for buying me lunch." Daniel D'Souza grinned, his cheeks still plump with the spicy treat tucked in. "Not at all. Thanks for agreeing to meet me here." Detective Syed swirled the sparkling water, then took another swig. It was a hot April afternoon. and Baga Beach looked bare. I know it's hard for you to talk about it, but what you can tell me can save a life. The fork fell into the green sauce, and the young man picked it back up. He wiped the corners of his mouth with the paper napkin Britos had stacked at every table, and met Detective Syed's gaze. Sir, I was just 14 at the time and was visiting my uncle and helped him in his gallery that sold souvenirs and other knickknacks. Detective Syed completed the statement and cataloged the antiques. It was off-season, and he had very few customers walking in. So, you used to stay till the shop closed in the evening? Yes. And what time would it close? All shops in Panaji close around 8 p.m. I thought you knew it, the youngster snorted. So, you closed at 8 p.m. every evening? Yes. No exceptions? Not any that I can recall? Well, on the 30th of April, 2016, it was open at least till 9:30 p.m. Afterwards, the CCTV blanked out. Oh, it was the last day of the month. Maybe it was open for stock taking, staying open late at night after a whole day of no business? Detective Syed cocked his left eyebrow. Detective, can I leave now? I'm not feeling too well, and I can't recall much. Daniel tried to slide out of his bamboo chair. The detective's eyes held steady. Daniel, I have not even started asking anything yet. And you know I'm going to get to it one way or the other. So, why don't you help me out here? I can be of no help to you, detective. I shouldn't even have come here. It was a mistake. Daniel got up and hobbled on the slippery sand. Detective Syed cleared his throat and said in a voice that rose above the waves that crashed outside, we went through the old CCTV footage. It shows someone coming out of the shop at 9:30 p.m. Daniel stopped in his tracks and turned. He walked back to the table and growled. You know, detective, I was a minor at the time and can't be charged with anything. True, but you could have been sent to a juvenile detention center. Could have been, but wasn't. Wait, for what? Daniel's face turned red. For whatever you didn't confess to, Detective Syed said in an even tone as he gestured for Daniel to sit down. We are not here to talk about it, though. We are here to discuss the footage we got from Tanishq Jewelry 3 days ago. Daniels sported the same look as the fish kept on the ice at the entrance. So, Daniel, how about you sit down and I'll order you a bibinka? No, thanks. I'm full. What is it that you want to know? Daniel, on the night of 30th April 2016, between 9 to 10 p.m., robbers drilled a hole in the back wall of Swarna Jewelers and hauled the stuff worth INR 8 crore with them. As you already know, it's next to Pablo's gallery. You didn't hear anything? No. As my uncle said at the time, I was not there. Daniel rasped through a clenched jaw, which we know now is not true. How can you say that? I'm sure many own a hoodie of the same brand, but I'm sure they will not be wearing one on a humid April night. And who said anything about a hoodie? What hoodie? Daniel countered. Detective Syed let out a chuckle. He knew it was the best antidote for teenage bravado. Okay, the same one that the CCTV outside Tanishq captured 3 days ago. This one should be easier to remember. Daniel's face turned pale. What is the connection between the two? You tell me. The detective parlayed in a calm voice. Okay, I was helping my uncle at the store the night Swarna Jewelers was looted. But I swear, we didn't hear a thing. We had almost finished when a man in a dark blue hoodie turned up at the store asking for a lighter. He was wearing shades, and I found that suspicious. He didn't realize I was watching him as he took out his wallet and dropped a gun. My uncle at the register could not see it, but I did. The vase in my hand fell, and the next moment, the gun was pointed at me. Okay, what happened next? I can't remember what exactly happened. Daniel's eyes were like the floodgates about to be opened. Detective Syed leaned back on his tubby chair, rocked the back of his head in his knitted hands, and cajoled. Take a deep breath and try again. That bebinka is still on the offer? I think my uncle begged him to spare me. The man asked us to turn off the CCTV and stay in the shop, and left. Was that what happened? Yes. And you left the city the next day to return after 5 years? Yes. Only the new CCTV footage we found from Tanishq across the street tells a different story. Detective Syed leaned forward and drummed his fingers on the table. Which is? Daniel sniggered. The man in the hoodie never walked out of the gallery. Daniel's eyes went wide. But you said you saw him walk out. No, it was a 14-year-old who walked out wearing a dead man's hoodie. Daniel gulped air. Detective Syed half shut his eyes, scratched his chin, and continued, and walked back into Tanishq store 3 days ago. And quite possibly other places across Goa before that. I have a theory. He was tracked down by the fellow robbers of the dead man. They made him an offer he could not refuse. Be a part of their gang, or go to juvie for murder. Daniel's face went blank. He whispered in a trembling voice, nice theory. I came back as I got admission into a college in the city, which is a nice cover-up. Daniel, you don't have to tell me what happened at the gallery that night. And I think I know the reason why you wore the same hoodie. Which is? Supposing your theory is correct, you wanted to be rescued. Is that a possibility? Daniel's eyes begged, still too scared to be hopeful. Yes, if you can help nab the gang and finish eating bebinka, the mistakes we've made. Content. Warning. Some swearing. The only problem with breaking into your neighbor's house is if someone else beats you to it. The Mastersons are gone for the month, summering in Fiji or Acapulco, or wherever people go when they're filthy rich and can afford to flaunt it by using words like summering. Before leaving, they'd asked me to watch their house. For free, of course. I smiled and told them they had nothing to worry about. It wasn't until their blue Bugatti sped down our dead-end street that I finally uncrossed the fingers hiding behind my back. Burglary 101. A good heist is all about patience. For 2 weeks now, I've spent night after sweaty July night sequestered in my stuffy attic with my telescope trained on the Masterson house, their backyard swimming pool, their organic vegetable garden, their novelty chicken mailbox. Think Rear Window. Only I'm not as handsome as James Stewart. Why wait so long? Because breaking into someone's house the first week they're on vacation is so predictable. And the second week, even less subtle. But the third week, no one ever suspects that third week, which is probably why, right now, during the middle of the third week, as I'm zipping up my black coveralls and adjusting my ski mask, as I'm stooping down to peer through my telescope, which has become a worse habit for me than day drinking, I can feel my heart free fall its way to the basement. Across the street, the shadow of a person creeps toward my neighbor's veranda. It's almost midnight. Everything is dark outside, like a chocolate cake when you don't bake it right, and the person shines a dim light in front of them. I hold my breath as they reach the door's smart lock. Their fingers bounce around the keypad with all the dexterity of a fat kid in a confectionery shop. Then the numbers light up, and the door swings open, and they slip inside the house. I wait a few more minutes, expecting to see a light bulb spark to life in one of the windows, when the place remains unlit. I grab my cell phone and a black hefty bag, and then I'm off, gliding across my house to the front door. Think risky business, only I'm not as smooth as Tom Cruise. I'll be honest with you. When I arrive at the Mastersons, fulfilling my promise to watch their house is the furthest thing from my mind. Really, I just don't want whoever's inside to take all the good shit before I get a chance. The smart lock keypad awaits my touch. My fingers move with all the dexterity of a fat kid running a mile. But the numbers still brighten, and the door swings open, coaxed by the passcode that I'd obtained after several months of attic telescoping. Inside, the house is as dark and chocolate cakey as outside. The scent of vanilla lingers in the air, sprayed every 15 minutes via one of the house's 1,000 automatic air fresheners. From the kitchen comes the sound of a cabinet being opened, wine glasses clinking. Using my phone's flashlight, I make my way toward the noise and hope whoever's in there hasn't yet discovered Mrs. Masterson's 60-piece bone china dinner set. I'm not sure what exactly you're supposed to say to someone who's hunched over and dumping a whole drawer of silverware into a burlap sack. So I aim my flashlight at their back and settle for a classic. Hi, how's it going? Nice and casual, not too confrontational, with a hint of politeness. Maybe I am as smooth as Tom Cruise. My words come as the last knife in the drawer hits the bottom of the sack. In an instant, the person drops both drawer and sack, grabs something from their waist, clicks a button. Blue light appears like magic. A thin strand of electricity crackles to life. Pointing the taser gun at me, she shouts, "Put your hands up, and don't fucking move." I'll be honest with you. I've always thought people who talk about love at first sight were full of it. But now, standing there in front of this woman, because there's no doubt the voice belongs to a woman. I get what they mean. Think of the most beautiful woman you've seen. Sandra Bullock, probably. Then imagine her standing there, pointing a stun gun at you in your neighbor's kitchen. Legs like a desert oasis, curves like a rainbow, brown hair flowing down her back as she straightens her trigger finger. Because that's exactly what this woman is like. At least, I imagine so. She's wearing a black latex catsuit and a matching ski mask that make her look formless in the veil of night, even in the taser's blue glow. Not 1 inch of skin showing. But sometimes, a voice is all you need to really know someone. That's how all my previous relationships have started, with a voice. And those were nice, while they lasted. Whoa, 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 I say, taking a few steps back and turning off my phone's flashlight to show her I'm harmless. I come in peace. Who are you? The words bubble like acid rain. My feet take another step back without asking my brain. The taser is still aimed at my chest. I'm the Mastersons' neighbor. I point vaguely in the direction of my house. She starts to close one eye like she's about to open fire, so I add, and believe it or not, I'm here to do the same thing you're doing. Slowly, finally, she lowers her weapon, so now it's aimed at my crotch. It's a small victory. I take what I can get these days. I want her to trust me, so I run my hand along the wall in search of the light switch. If she could only see the hefty bag in my hand, she'd know where we stand. At last, the switch pricks my thumb, and all at once, we're bathed in pure white light. Cut that shit off, she hisses. And it's like Jesus himself said the words. They sound so beautiful. And so is she, probably. But the light switch clicks, and it's dark again. She looks out the window, swivels her head from end to end of the sidewalk. Then she taps a button on her taser, and the blue crackling is gone, replaced by a regular flashlight, which she shines directly in my eyes. Are you trying to get me caught? Sorry. Unbelievable, she mutters, and crouches to pick up her burlap sack, leaving the silverware drawer on the floor. The sliver of moonlight from the window makes her look like an angel. An angel who's approaching the 60-piece bone china collection with my name on it. I rap on the wall twice, and it works. She stops, turns to face me. The moonlight reveals only the left side of her ski mask. Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot, I say, peeling off my own mask with one hand and offering a truce with the other. I'm Mac, by the way. She stares at my proffered hand, like she doesn't want to contract whatever form of leprosy I have. The night air is a blanket, heavy and warm around us, filled with the songs of crickets and cicadas. We stand there, listening to the house groan under our feet. Above our heads, the ski mask feels like a dumbbell in my hand. This is usually the part where you tell me your name. No, the woman says, arcing her taser flashlight across the adjoining living room. She marches to the baby grand piano in the corner, no doubt trying to devise a way to wheel it into the night. Okay, I'll just call you Jenny, I say, following her. That was my last girlfriend's name, which is information that was supposed to stay in my head before my mouth sabotaged me. But now it's too late. The words bridge the space between us like a Chinese finger trap, binding us together as accomplices. She pauses, one hand poised atop a stack of outdated sheet music. Beethoven or Bach or Mariah Carey. Turning around, she stares at me behind her ski mask and opens her glossy mouth. It doesn't matter that she showed up to a robbery wearing lipstick. It doesn't matter that she almost tased me 2 minutes ago. My heartbeat quickens all the same, and my blood rushes to places where it probably shouldn't be. Slowly, finally, she says, "Shut up, Max," and dumps the music into her sack, Mariah Carey and all. And it doesn't even matter that she got my name wrong. She could read the yellow pages, cover to cover, and I would listen forever, falling asleep and waking up to the sound of her voice every day. So, yes, I shut up. We shuffle to separate corners of the living room and inspect our potential treasures. And let me tell you, it's the longest 5 minutes of silence in my life. But then, as I'm snatching a handful of angelfish from the Masterson's aquarium and tossing them into my garbage bag, curiosity creeps up on me like it's driving a free candy van. And I can't help but to ask, how did you get past the smart lock anyway? It took me weeks of watching with my telescope to get the numbers. I cringe hearing the word meeks, a hasty overcorrection, when I opted not to tell her how long my spying has actually been going on. Jenny scoffs from across the room, where she's trying desperately to pry a taxidermied deer head from its throne above the mantelpiece. Really? You couldn't figure out 1234? She turns and gives me a dismissive shake of her head. They're boomers. It's not frickin' rocket science. Another candy van question slips out. Why are you doing this? She sighs and stops tugging, but keeps her hands on the antlers. I'm just taking what I'm owed. That's all, she says. Her voice is different than before, softer maybe. I mean, seriously, these people can go to Acapulco for a month, but they can't afford to pay their employees a decent wage. So it was Acapulco, I murmur. You know something? I'd probably be home right now watching Netflix if Ed weren't so fucking stingy. Whether she means Mr. Edwin Masterson or Mrs. Edna Masterson, it's impossible to say. and I don't feel it's my place to ask. I see. What about you? Jenny has given up on the deer head, opting for the floor-to-ceiling bookshelf instead. They aren't paying you right either. I could tell her the truth, that the Mastersons have never wronged me, have always invited me to their cookouts and their Christmas parties, that I'm just a guy with too much time on his hands, all the time in the world, and something to prove, that I'm invading someone else's life tonight to try to find some meaning in my own, that I'm a spineless, indecisive loser, and I'm destined to let the world walk all over me. That last one is what my previous girlfriend told me anyway. Old Jenny. But that was 3 years ago. People can change in that amount of time, right? I would never have thought of breaking into this house 3 years ago. If that's not change, I don't know what is. New Jenny is staring at me, awaiting my answer. Yeah, something like that, I tell her, plunging my hand back into the aquarium. Figures. She flings a tattered Gutenberg Bible into her burlap sack. Hypocrites. Cab. Burglary 201. Always use the toilet before a heist. When I return from the bathroom, couldn't have been in there more than 5 minutes. The living room is abandoned. From the kitchen comes the rattle of a teacup and a saucer. And then I know this woman is no angel. In the kitchen, Jenny stands on her tiptoes to reach the top of the cabinet. She curls a few fingers around a piece of Mrs. Masterson's bone china, a white teacup with floral patterning. It is the penultimate item in the cabinet. What the hell are you doing? I say, as she lowers her body, cup in hand. My voice, louder than expected, ricochets off the now empty walls like a pinball. She startles, then slips her present into her sack. A reverse Santa Claus. What does it look like? You're taking my bone china set is what it looks like. Jenny shrugs and points to the lone piece in the cabinet. A plain-looking white saucer with gold trim. All yours. Have at it. No. I grab my soggy, hefty bag from its spot by the aquarium, stretch it as wide as it'll go. Give me half. The air freshener on the wall vomits vanilla mist as Jenny cocks her head. So, she says, nodding at the cabinet. Do you want it or not? Half, I demand. She snorts and shakes her head. Done with me. Hauling her sack, she troops down the hallway toward the bathroom. I have to stop myself from grabbing her arm. The equation is simple arithmetic. She has a taser. I don't. The saucer is an orphan in its cupboard, waiting for someone to take pity on it. It's cool to the touch in my longing fingertips. My hefty bag is still gaping like a hungry, hungry hippo. But I slide the saucer in my breast pocket for safekeeping. The toilet flushes, and Jenny emerges from the bathroom, still dragging her riches. She frowns when she sees me standing there. You know, I think I misjudged you, Jenny. You're not an angel at all. You know that? Her laugh is like the curtains bulging from her sack, velvety and hideous. Oh, I'm not an angel? Breaking news? More at 11. Her taser flashlight falls on my trash bag. What? You think you're some kind of saint? These people aren't my neighbors. I'm supposed to be watching the house, actually, I confess. That's really why I'm here. Mr. Masterson put his faith in me. Well, you're doing a great job. Jenny opens a hallway closet and inspects Mrs. Masterson's collection of mink coats as though she's in a bookstore, contemplating life's hardest decision. Paperback or hardcover? Let me know if you need a letter of recommendation. My face feels like it's summering in Acapulco. The novelty of Jenny's sarcasm has worn off. Now it leaves me grinding my teeth. Look, I'm gonna step outside, I tell her, tapping the imaginary vape pen in my pocket. I need a smoke break. 10 minutes, max, Jenny commands, with all the authority of a Walmart manager. I'm still wondering if that meant maximum, or if she'd simply mispronounced my name again when I stumble out into the night. A hot, gentle breeze greets me on the sidewalk, a gift from the passing cars on the next block. My house sits across the street, pale and lonely, and devoid of bone china. The telescope in the attic is pointed directly at me, watching. The Mastersons' novelty chicken mailbox taunts me. They are all waiting for me to do what it is I actually came out here for. Why not? Why not fulfill my promise? Just so she can walk away with my dinner set while I get to drag some dead fish home. It only takes a few taps of my phone. Then a voice on the other end comes through, high-pitched and much too perky. 911. What's your emergency? Hi. How's it going? Yeah, hey, my house is being broken into right now, I say, and pray this woman doesn't know what Mr. Masterson sounds like as I give her the address. She's got a mountain of questions for me high as Everest, and I listen to myself answer them. Only I'm talking on autopilot because I'm too busy thinking about the two Jennys, old and new. How old Jenny would have called me spineless for what I'm doing now, turning someone in while being part of the problem. How new Jenny came here tonight because she wanted to right a wrong, because she believed in something. At least one of us has a good reason. And that gets me thinking, she can't be all bad, right? Maybe not an angel, but not all bad. She did let me have the last saucer. Maybe we just started off on the wrong foot. Maybe we could get to know each other better. Maybe then she'd even tell me her name. The operator is still talking a mile a minute when I interrupt. Hold on, I think there are two people in the house now. Yes, another one just joined. And when I feed her the Masterson's address again, I whisper, "Please come quickly." But I'll be honest with you. That last part is for dramatic effect, just to see how long it'll take someone to show up to a fancy place like this. 5 minutes? 10? What do I care? I have all the time in the world. The operator tells me it won't be long, that they're sending someone right now to come help. She asks me to stay calm and remain where I am. So I stroll to the front door. I can hear Jenny's voice before my feet touch the porch, cussing one of the Eds out as she lugs her sack across the marble floor. Her bone china jingles in the night like a plea, begging my lone saucer to partake. I retrieve it from my pocket, give it a squeeze, and step inside, ready to see the mistakes we've made. The corpse in the city. The car comes to a halt at the far edge of the car park behind the bank. Tom sits quietly for a moment, as if in a trance, eyes forward. Only his left arm moves as he pulls on the handbrake. His eyes drop, focusing on his finger, pressing the button to release the boot lid. Slowly, he turns his head and glares. "Are you going to help me or not?" Jim lets out a puff of breath, leans his elbow on the car door, and stands up. His shoes crunch on the dark gravel. The car park is deserted. With wide eyes scanning the area, he moves to the rear of the car and begins wrestling with the wheelchair. This thing's worse than a deck chair. Jim whacks the wheelchair onto the ground and rubs his hands across the seat as he finally gets it unraveled and stable. Tom opens the rear passenger side door and unclips the seat belt that is holding his Uncle Charlie upright. There is now an urgency in his manner. His breath comes in short, sharp bursts as he scurries round the back of the car, slams the boot shut, and then crawls along the back seat toward Uncle Charlie. "Line the chair up, Jim. You pull and I'll shove." Tom places one palm on Uncle Charlie's shoulder, one on his hip, groans and pushes. Jim tugs on a resistant arm and leg. Eventually, Uncle Charlie lands with a flop on the seat of the wheelchair. Jim tugs at the black overcoat to straighten him up, tucks in his arms, and lifts his feet onto the footrest. The sound of 4 doors and the boot closing echoes around the vacant car park and surrounding tall buildings. Yellow lights flash, showing the car is now securely locked. Standing back, Tom inspects his Uncle Charlie. "What does he look like?" "Dead," says Jim. Pull his hat down over his face a bit more. Jim grabs the rim of the dark brown trilby and forces it over Charlie's head, then tilts it forward, covering Charlie's eyes. Tom takes another look and nods his approval. Gathering the strap from the back of the footrest, he buckles in his uncle's legs and then wraps a green tartan blanket tightly around them. He places a second blanket across his uncle's lap, covering his uncle's hands, and tucks that securely in down the sides. He straightens his back and breathes out a satisfactory sigh. "That'll do. I'm not happy doing this," says Jim. Tom's head spins round. "What? I'm not happy. Well, you're a bit late telling me that. If you want some of the money, then you'd better start feeling happy right now." Jim mumbles under his breath, snatches the handles of the wheelchair, and begins pushing it across the loose tarmac of the car park toward the exit. His breathing becomes labored as the wheels spin in every direction. Charlie's head bobs up and down, loosening the trilby. Tom reaches over to straighten it out as Jim marches onwards toward the smooth pavement and the bank entrance. "I'll do all the talking. You just agree with me if they say anything to you." The blood drains from Jim's face. He says nothing. The two men push the wheelchair into the bank and join the queue. Jim hums to himself. Tom prods him. Jim stops humming. Tom fiddles with his Uncle Charlie's hat and the buttons of his overcoat. "Are you all right there, Charlie? Won't be long now, and we can get you home for a nice cuppa." Jim stares at Tom in disbelief. "He's a..." Tom kicks Jim in the shins. "Ouch." "Next." The cashier's voice booms across the interior of the bank. "Can we withdraw some money for my Uncle Charlie, please?" Tom points to Uncle Charlie in the wheelchair as he hands over the slip of paper. "Is he all right?" says the cashier. "He's had a stroke." "Sorry to hear that. It's a lot of money. We don't normally deal in such vast sums. He's going into a home tomorrow, and he needs the money to buy bits and pieces. You know what it's like. The care homes take all your dosh." "I do indeed." The cashier smiles. "If you'd care to wait, I'll sort this out for you. I see your uncle has already signed the slip." "Well done, Uncle Charlie." Tom bends over the wheelchair and pats the knees covered by the blanket. Charlie does not move. The cashier returns, stamps 3 sheets of paper, smiles, and hands over a large envelope full of notes through the slit underneath the protective glass. "Next. Come on, Jim. Let's get out of here." Tom grabs the handles of the wheelchair, spins it round, and heads for the exit. Jim scuttles along behind as Tom races along the pavement back toward the car park. Tom turns the wheelchair round, tips it up onto the 2 back wheels, and drags it across the undulating ground. "We did it, Jim. We did it." Tom lets out a muffled laugh as he squeezes Jim's biceps. "Now, let's get the bastard back in the car." Tom checks the car park for pedestrians, then grabs the shoulders of his uncle. Jim unbuckles the legs and takes hold of the ankles. Between them, the 2 men heave the motionless mass into the car and slide it along the back seat. Jim spreads the 2 blankets on top and throws the wheelchair into the boot, then sinks into the passenger seat. The engine revs as Tom's white knuckles grip the steering wheel. The car speeds out the exit as the spinning tires kick up black tarmac. "What are you going to do with Uncle Charlie?" says Jim. "We've got to put him where they can't find him. There's a skip over there." Jim pointed. "Don't be daft. What about one of those giant green bins?" There's one outside, the dog and Badger. Are you mad? We can't just dump him anywhere. The police will find him. It's got to be somewhere. No one knows. We're going back to my place now, and we'll get rid of the knobhead later tonight. We've got to do it soon, before he turns black and smells. Tom stops the car in front of the garage, while Jim jumps out and opens the doors. The car shunts forward. Tom switches off the engine and gets out. He helps Jim secure the garage doors, and then they both go into the house. Jim sinks into the nearest armchair and immediately falls asleep. Tom races upstairs and jumps in the shower. He looks at the clock. They've got to be on the move before midnight. Tom carries the 2 suitcases downstairs and places them by the front door. He nudges Jim awake. In whispers, he tells Jim to hurry and organize himself, as they must deal with Uncle Charlie on the way to the airport. Jim rubs his eyes, goes into the kitchen, drinks a glass of water, grabs a biscuit, and then goes into the downstairs toilet. When he comes out, Tom tells him to take the 2 suitcases and put them in the back of the car, and not to forget the coil of rope that is hanging on a hook just inside the garage door. Jim puts the 2 suitcases and the coil of rope in the car. Tom starts the engine and backs out. He stops the car in the driveway, gets out, and checks the front door and closes the garage doors. Where are we going, Tom? To that new industrial estate they're building on the outskirts of the city. It's on the way to the airport. They arrive at the new industrial estate, and Tom parks in a mud-filled lay-by near some railings at the end of the no-through road. Get the rope and tie it tight round that shithead's chest. Make sure you go under his arms with it. Jim takes hold of the rope, pushes it under Charlie's back, and ties it in a tight knot over his chest. Tom takes a jemmy from the boot of the car and lifts a manhole cover and drags it to one side, close to the railings. Tom grabs the rope and lugs Charlie out of the car. Charlie hits the ground with a loud thud. Tom and Jim take an in-breath and look around. Silence. Tom continues dragging Charlie across the mud to the waiting hole. Now you help me lower him in. Slowly, they eke out the rope and lower Charlie into the hole. Then secure the end of the rope onto a girder near the top and replace the cover. Will he be all right? Says Jim. What do you think? Says Tom. What'll I do with the blankets and the wheelchair? Says Jim. Tom points to some bushes behind the car. Throw them over there. Jim takes the blankets and slings them over the bushes, and then heaves the wheelchair in the same direction. Come on, Jim. We've got an hour's drive to the airport yet. Tom sits back in the seat on the airplane and sips his red wine. Jim's head falls forward, and loud snoring pours forth from it. Tom and Jim pull up a stool at the beach bar, their favorite haunt from previous Spanish excursions. Relaxed and smiling, they order a beer and proceed to quench their thirst for the high life. A heavy hand on their shoulder makes them jump as the tanned, bulky torso of a man stands between them. Don't normally see you 2 idiots here this time of year. Tom flops his head forward, clearly relieved to see it's a friendly face. "Hi, Jack." "No, you're right. Just visiting for a bit." "And where's Charlie?" "The old bugger hasn't snuffed it, has he?" Tom coughs. Jim swallows hard. "No, he's fine. Didn't want to come. We've left him hanging around back home." A life of regret. When Raj had stealthily installed the iSpy 200 Vision Plus device on his wife's prescription glasses 2 weeks ago, he had no idea the device would enable him to watch and hear from her perspective, in a way, relive her last day alive. It was this morning Raj had received the Blue Dart courier with the pen drive containing the recording of the last day of Mira's life, her first and only day of wearing her glasses with the iSpy installed, just before the horrific car accident in which her car had been hit on the rear by another fast-moving vehicle. The police believed it to be a truck or a bus. Mira's Ford Endeavor had spiraled out of control and plunged into the river beside the road where she had drowned before she could be rescued. When her car had been pulled out, Raj had collected her things, including her glasses, and sent them to the technical facility of the iSpy Corporation in Mumbai, where the team had extracted the audio and video recorded on the device and mailed the file to Raj on a pen drive, along with a hefty check for their services. Taking a deep breath, Raj poured himself a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, which also happened to be Mira's favorite wine, for he needed his courage for what he was about to do. 3 large gulps and soothing warmth in his throat equipped him the nerve to plug in the pen drive and click on the folder dated July 24th, 2021. Wondering what their 16-year-old daughter Hina would think of this blatant breach of his wife's privacy. Raj pressed the play key. The world came into focus with dainty hands, with black painted fingernails, placing the glasses over a nose. The camera panned to the left and focused on the other side of the bed, where a portly man lay sleeping, with his mouth slightly agape. Raj watched the laptop screen, with his heart racing, as Mira leaned closer and kissed his bearded face before wrapping her gown around her body and proceeding towards the bathroom. He paused and watched the affectionate gesture again, frowning. He must have been fast asleep because he didn't remember his wife kissing him in the past 3 months. Not since his near-fatal heart attack. Was there a corner of her heart that still loved him, even though she was cheating on him? Raj shrugged the thought away, and taking another sip of the wine, resumed playing the video. In the bathroom, Mira placed her glasses on the bathroom sink while she proceeded to undress and step into the shower. For a few moments, Raj hated himself for lowering the laptop screen. This wasn't why he was spying on his wife, and somewhere in his heart, he knew he was violating her privacy after she was dead, which made it worse. But then he lifted the screen once again to watch his wife bathing. still as glorious at 43 as she was 20 years ago when they had first met. Raj couldn't credit her genes for her fitness levels, for her two sisters were both overweight and looked 10 years older than their age. The credit was all Mira's. She loved swimming in the clubhouse and sweating it out in their backyard with her 10-kilogram kettlebell. With a twang of shame, Raj glanced at the tires of fat around his waist, which made it impossible to see his feet without leaning over. Maybe he deserved a wife who cheated on him. After all, he had completely let go of himself over the past 10 years. A factor, his doctor proclaimed, had contributed to Raj suffering a massive heart attack at 46, despite having no history of heart disease. Mira put on her glasses as she emerged from the bathroom and got dressed in a navy blue suit for her office meeting. Each Monday, she had a meeting with her boss, a man she detested but tolerated because it allowed her to provide for her family. As she combed her long, wavy hair and effortlessly styled them into a chignon, Raj caught his own reflection in the mirror on the chin behind her. A middle-aged, unshaven, unemployed man perched on the edge of the bed, wistfully watching his beautiful and successful wife, who was everything he wasn't. Did he feel resentful towards her? Was it her fault she had done well in her life, while he had simply failed at everything he tried? Was it love that still kept them together? Or was she only with him for the sake of their teenage daughter? "I'm going to be late today," she said, without glancing at her husband. "Today's the last date for the submission of the RFP response, and Kana would expect me to finish it before I finish my day." "How late?" he asked desolately. "Late," she said firmly, giving him an icy stare. "Eat your dinner if I'm not home by 8. I hope you can manage to feed yourself and Hina." It was more of a statement than a question. Raj heaved himself from the bed with much effort. "Let me get breakfast started. I'll eat in the office. Anyway, I can't eat anything before my Monday morning meeting. You know that." Through the camera, Raj saw his own sorry figure as Mira grabbed her purse and laptop bag and left the room without another word to him. She paused by their daughter's room, and after a perfunctory knock, opened the door and stepped in, closing the door behind her. Raj remembered sticking his ear to the door, eavesdropping on their conversation. But all he had heard were some muffled noises, as though they were deliberately trying to keep their voices down. It had started 2 months ago, when one night, Raj had woken up to find his wife's side of the bed empty, and loud arguing noises coming from their daughter's room. As he had tiptoed to Hina's room, he heard his wife yelling, "Do you know how old you are? I'm 16. I'm not a child anymore. You're just 16. You're still a child. You cannot do this." "I can and I will," the daughter had argued back. "I forbid you." And on the argument had fired back and forth between mother and daughter until Raj had stepped into the room and both had frozen. And then sputtered an apology for waking him up. Docilely, Hina had apologized to her mother, and Mira had embraced her daughter. But Raj had sensed that it was just a temporary ceasefire owing to his heart condition, and the real issue between mother and daughter was not yet resolved. When he had probed about the subject of the argument, both had dilly-dallied without giving him the truth. While he appreciated their concern for his health, Raj wanted to be part of important discussions affecting their daughter and wasn't happy with being left out. Now he watched keenly as Mira stood facing their daughter, Hina, who was still in bed as it was early for school. "Good morning, sweetheart," Mira said warmly. Hina, a scrawny 16-year-old girl with crazy curly hair, mumbled a good morning from under the covers. "I was leaving for office. I wanted to talk to you before I go," said Mira, sitting on the edge of the bed. Hina sat up on the bed, rubbing her eyes. "Yes, Mom. Is everything okay? Is Dad okay?" Raj's heart swelled with happiness at the concern he heard in his daughter's voice for his health. While not the most affectionate or expressive person in the room, Hina did show her love occasionally through her gestures. Mira sighed deeply. "Your dad's fine. He's recovering, you know. We can't let anything stress him out." Raj thought Hina looked away guiltily at her mother's words. "You know what I'm talking about, right?" Mira pressed on. "Yes, Mom. Have you met him again? Outside classes?" "No." "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure, Mom." Mira's gaze dropped to the bed cover, and her delicate fingers smoothed out the covers. "I know you went to his house on Friday." Hina's expression was that of a deer caught in the headlights. I went to his house to say goodbye," she stammered. Mira's sigh was deep and audible. "I want to believe you. Really, I do. But I can't. You've broken my trust, Hina." Hina was now almost in tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom. But really, I had gone to his house for the last goodbye. I'll never see him again. Except at school, of course, where I can't avoid him." "Good. You know, once your dad is better, we'll do something to fix this problem permanently." Hina's ears perked up at the suggestion. "What do you mean, Mom?" "I mean, there's more we can do to fix this problem. I don't want to do anything right now because of your dad's precarious health. But once he's better..." At this, Hina threw the covers and jumped out of bed. "You can't punish him, Mom. It was my fault as much as his. Promise me you won't do anything." Mira rose, placing the strap of her laptop bag across her chest. "I'm not promising anything, sweetheart. Let's talk about our options in a few weeks' time. Until then, if you see him again outside class, I'll know right away." Hina stared at the wall clock behind her mother's head. "I won't see him like I promised." Raj's mind galloped to process the new information he had learned about his daughter. She had a boyfriend. Apparently, a boy from her class. Was that the reason for the strife between his wife and his daughter? Or was there more? He wondered. as he fast-forwarded the part of Mira's day where she attended her Monday morning meeting with her boss and worked in the office. Everything about the exchange surprised him because he was the overprotective parent, constantly worrying about every little thing regarding their daughter, while Mira was more of a liberal parent who allowed Hina to experiment and even encouraged mistakes, even though he thought it inadvisable for young people to date before 18. What Hina was going through was completely natural and expected. Why had his wife freaked out so much on finding out about Hina's boyfriend? Resuming the video from the point where Mira got into her Ford Endeavor after leaving office, Raj watched keenly as she checked her freshly applied lipstick in the rearview mirror and used her dainty hands to smooth her hair and tuck some wild strands behind her ear. She turned on the ignition and began driving in a direction opposite to where their home was located. When the police had questioned Raj about where his wife was returning from that fateful day, he had surmised that perhaps she had taken a detour to the market to shop for something for their daughter's upcoming 17th birthday. And maybe she had liked something, but wanted to discuss with her husband before buying the gift. Raj wasn't quite sure what had prevented him from sharing his suspicions with the police that his wife was probably having an affair and was returning from a rendezvous with the other man. It was probably as a token of respect for their 18-year-old marriage and consideration for their daughter that Raj had kept his suspicions to himself. With rapt attention, Raj watched the curve of the river hugging the road and the familiar city roads zipping past the fast-moving vehicle. As he expected, the car moved through the South City Market and towards the residential area next to it. Mira parked the car behind a dented Mahindra XUV 500, parked in the parking space, and stepped out with her purse over her shoulder. She rummaged through her purse for something, and apparently not finding it in there, she leaned into the car, opened the glove compartment, and extracted a pepper spray. With the pepper spray ensconced in her purse, she marched to the front door and rang the bell. The pepper spray confused Raj. If she was going to meet her lover, he'd have expected her to be rummaging in her purse for something other than a pepper spray. The heavy brown door was opened by a balding man with horn-rimmed glasses on his nose. Mr. Segal? Hina's physics teacher? Was Mira having an affair with him? She detested the man and had even argued with him over some marks after the first term examination results. Nothing made sense. The man's face deflated on seeing the visitor. Raj thought Segal looked shocked to the point of being afraid on seeing Mira. Surprised? Said Mira. Why? Were you expecting my daughter? I don't know what you're talking about, the man stammered. I know you've been having a romantic relationship with my underage daughter. The man inhaled deeply. I have no idea what you're talking about. I have proof. Those letters you wrote to her. I found them, and I immediately knew They weren't written by a boy, but by a grown-up man. How could you do this? You're at least 50 years old. You disgust me. The man's nostrils flared with fury. Listen, you can't come to my doorstep and accuse me of something I haven't done. You need to leave, he said, beginning to close the door. Mira's ring-studded hand stopped the door from closing. I am leaving, but not before I warn you to stay away from my daughter. If you try to talk to her outside the class again, I'm going to inform the police. The only reason I haven't already contacted them is that Hina begged me. She begged me to let it go, and... Mira paused. The man was peering from behind the half-closed door with his narrowed eyes. And what? Mira sighed deeply. And nothing. I'm not calling the police right now because of my husband, who is ill. I don't want him to know about this mess. But if you contact my daughter again, I'll have no option but to call the police. Raj's world was spinning around him. So this was what the mother-daughter arguments were about. Now that he realized what had happened, it made perfect sense. Why then had his mind jumped to the conclusion that his wife was cheating on him? And the reason Hina was arguing with her mother was that she had somehow found out about her mother's affair? How could he have been so naive to jump to a disturbing conclusion based on a mere happenstance? The only thing Mira was trying to do was protecting their daughter from the pedophile and protecting her sick husband from the stress of the situation. The sudden onset of guilt at suspecting his innocent wife of cheating on him and violating her privacy made Raj sick in his stomach. Having half a mind to close the laptop screen, Raj continued watching what was probably the last hour of his late wife's life. Soon, she would be on her way back home, and her Ford Endeavor would be hit on the rear by a vehicle that would send her spinning towards the river and to her death. Things seemed to be moving in slow motion as Mira delivered the final threat to the physics teacher, and leaving him with his jaw hanging, reversed her car out of the driveway, turning around towards her home as she drove on the highway next to the river. Raj kept his gaze on her rearview mirror, his heart racing. If he was lucky, he'd be able to view the plate number of the vehicle that had hit his wife's car and hand over the evidence to the police. With his heart in his throat, Raj watched several large vehicles on the highway approaching his wife's car, and some of them overtaking it. Resisting an urge to tightly shut his eyes, Raj continued watching the last few minutes of his wife's life. What must be going on in her mind at the time, he wondered. He regretted not telling his wife how much he loved her and how much he appreciated her supporting the family, especially since he had lost his job. He regretted every harsh word he had said to his wife, every missed opportunity to appreciate her. Each occasion he could have been kinder to her. Thinking of their arguments, And every time he had raised his voice at her, made him run with shame. Was this his punishment for not living a purposeful life? For not living deliberately, but just drifting along the currents of everyday life? Raj sat bolt upright as he saw a vehicle he recognized approach his wife's car from behind. This couldn't be right. Why was the man following her? Raj knew the answer to the question a split second before he saw Segal ram his Mahindra XUV 500 into his wife's car and send her spinning towards the river. Water engulfed the world around him, and he saw the bubbles of air escaping his wife's mouth and nose as the water pressure shattered the windows and rushed into the rapidly sinking car, drowning its only occupant. At some point in time, the glasses drifted away from Mira's face and through the camera. Raj saw his wife's face for the very last time. Some of the guilt that Raj felt for violating his wife's privacy was washed away with the knowledge that he now had the evidence to bring his wife's murderer to justice. Wiping the tears from his eyes, Raj closed the video file and picked up the phone to dial the police. A life of regret. When Raj had stealthily installed the iSpy 200 Vision Plus device on his wife's prescription glasses 2 weeks ago, he had no idea the device would enable him to watch and hear from her perspective. In a way, relive her last day alive. It was this morning Raj had received the Blue Dart courier with the pen drive containing the recording of the last day of Mira's life, her first and only day of wearing her glasses with the iSpy installed, just before the horrific car accident in which her car had been hit on the rear by another fast-moving vehicle. The police believed it to be a truck or a bus. Mira's Ford Endeavor had spiraled out of control and plunged into the river beside the road where she had drowned before she could be rescued. When her car had been pulled out, Raj had collected her things, including her glasses, and sent them to the technical facility of the iSpy Corporation in Mumbai, where the team had extracted the audio and video recorded on the device and mailed the file to Raj on a pen drive along with a hefty check for their services. Taking a deep breath, Raj poured himself a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, which also happened to be Mira's favorite wine, for he needed his courage for what he was about to do. 3 large gulps and soothing warmth in his throat equipped him the nerve to plug in the pen drive and click on the folder dated July 24th, 2021. Wondering what their 16-year-old daughter Hina would think of this blatant breach of his wife's privacy, Raj pressed the play key. The world came into focus with dainty hands with black painted fingernails, placing the glasses over a nose. The camera panned to the left and focused on the other side of the bed, where a portly man lay sleeping with his mouth slightly agape. Raj watched the laptop screen with his heart racing as Mira leaned closer and kissed his bearded face before wrapping her gown around her body and proceeding towards the bathroom. He paused and watched the affectionate gesture again, frowning. He must have been fast asleep because he didn't remember his wife kissing him in the past 3 months. Not since his near-fatal heart attack. Was there a corner of her heart that still loved him, even though she was cheating on him? Raj shrugged the thought away, and taking another sip of the wine, resumed playing the video. In the bathroom, Mira placed her glasses on the bathroom sink while she proceeded to undress and step into the shower. For a few moments, Raj hated himself for lowering the laptop screen. This wasn't why he was spying on his wife, and somewhere in his heart, he knew he was violating her privacy after she was dead, which made it worse. But then he lifted the screen once again to watch his wife bathing, still as glorious at 43 as she was 20 years ago when they had first met. Raj couldn't credit her genes for her fitness levels, for her 2 sisters were both overweight and looked 10 years older than their age. The credit was all Mira's. She loved swimming in the clubhouse and sweating it out in their backyard with her 10-kilogram kettlebell. With a twang of shame, Raj glanced at the tires of fat around his waist, which made it impossible to see his feet without leaning over. Maybe he deserved a wife who cheated on him. After all, he had completely let go of himself over the past 10 years. A factor, his doctor proclaimed, had contributed to Raj suffering a massive heart attack at 46, despite having no history of heart disease. Mira put on her glasses as she emerged from the bathroom and got dressed in a navy blue suit for her office meeting. Each Monday, she had a meeting with her boss, a man she detested but tolerated because it allowed her to provide for her family. As she combed her long, wavy hair and effortlessly styled them into a chignon, Raj caught his own reflection in the mirror on the bed behind her. A middle-aged, unshaven, unemployed man perched on the edge of the bed, wistfully watching his beautiful and successful wife, who was everything he wasn't. Did he feel resentful towards her? Was it her fault she had done well in her life while he had simply failed at everything he tried? Was it love that still kept them together? Or was she only with him for the sake of their teenage daughter? "I'm going to be late today," she said, without glancing at her husband. Today's the last date for the submission of the RFP response, and Kana would expect me to finish it before I finish my day. "How late?" he asked desolately. "Late," she said firmly, giving him an icy stare. "Eat your dinner if I'm not home by 8. I hope you can manage to feed yourself and Hina." It was more of a statement than a question. Raj heaved himself from the bed with much effort. "Let me get breakfast started. I'll eat in the office. Anyway, I can't eat anything before my Monday morning meeting, you know that." Through the camera, Raj saw his own sorry figure as Mira grabbed her purse and laptop bag and left the room without another word to him. She paused by their daughter's room and, after a perfunctory knock, opened the door and stepped in, closing the door behind her. Raj remembered sticking his ear to the door, eavesdropping on their conversation. But all he had heard were some muffled noises, as though they were deliberately trying to keep their voices down. It had started 2 months ago, when one night, Raj had woken up to find his wife's side of the bed empty and loud arguing noises coming from their daughter's room. As he had tiptoed to Hina's room, he heard his wife yelling, "Do you know how old you are? I'm 16. I'm not a child anymore. You're just 16. You're still a child. You cannot do this." "I can, and I will," the daughter had argued back. "I forbid you," and on and on. The argument had fired back and forth between mother and daughter until Raj had stepped into the room and both had frozen, and then sputtered an apology for waking him up. Docilely, Hina had apologized to her mother, and Mira had embraced her daughter. But Raj had sensed that it was just a temporary ceasefire owing to his heart condition, and the real issue between mother and daughter was not yet resolved. When he had probed about the subject of the argument, both had dilly-dallied without giving him the truth. While he appreciated their concern for his health, Raj wanted to be part of important discussions affecting their daughter and wasn't happy with being left out. Now he watched keenly as Mira stood facing their daughter, Hina, who was still in bed, as it was early for school. "Good morning, sweetheart," Mira said warmly. Hina, a scrawny 16-year-old girl with crazy curly hair, mumbled a good morning from under the covers. "I was leaving for office. I wanted to talk to you before I go," said Mira, sitting on the edge of the bed. Hina sat up on the bed, rubbing her eyes. "Yes, Mom. Is everything okay? Is Dad okay?" Raj's heart swelled with happiness at the concern he heard in his daughter's voice for his health. While not the most affectionate or expressive person in the room, Hina did show her love occasionally through her gestures. Mira sighed deeply. "Your dad's fine. He's recovering, you know. We can't let anything stress him out." Raj thought Hina looked away guiltily at her mother's words. "You know what I'm talking about, right?" Mira pressed on. "Yes, Mom. Have you met him again? Outside classes?" "No." "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure, Mom." Mira's gaze dropped to the bed cover, and her delicate fingers smoothed out the covers. "I know you went to his house on Friday." Hina's expression was that of a deer caught in the headlights. I went to his house to say goodbye," she stammered. Mira's sigh was deep and audible. "I want to believe you. Really, I do. But I can't. You've broken my trust, Hina." Hina was now almost in tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom. But really, I had gone to his house for the last goodbye. I'll never see him again. Except at school, of course, where I can't avoid him." "Good. You know, once your dad is better, We'll do something to fix this problem permanently. Hina's ears perked up at the suggestion. What do you mean, Mom? I mean, there's more we can do to fix this problem. I don't want to do anything right now because of your dad's precarious health. But once he's better, at this, Hina threw the covers and jumped out of bed. You can't punish him, Mom. It was my fault as much as his. Promise me you won't do anything. Mira rose, placing the strap of her laptop bag across her chest. I'm not promising anything, sweetheart. Let's talk about our options in a few weeks' time. Until then, if you see him again outside class, I'll know right away. Hina stared at the wall clock behind her mother's head. I won't see him like I promised. Raj's mind galloped to process the new information he had learned about his daughter. She had a boyfriend. Apparently, a boy from her class. Was that the reason for the strife between his wife and his daughter? Or was there more, he wondered, as he fast-forwarded the part of Mira's day where she attended her Monday morning meeting with her boss and worked in the office. Everything about the exchange surprised him because he was the overprotective parent, constantly worrying about every little thing regarding their daughter, while Mira was more of a liberal parent who allowed Hina to experiment and even encouraged mistakes, even though he thought it inadvisable for young people to date before 18. What Hina was going through was completely natural and expected. Why had his wife freaked out so much on finding out about Hina's boyfriend? Resuming the video from the point where Mira got into her Ford Endeavor after leaving office, Raj watched keenly as she checked her freshly applied lipstick in the rearview mirror and used her dainty hands to smooth her hair and tuck some wild strands behind her ear. She turned on the ignition and began driving in a direction opposite to where their home was located. When the police had questioned Raj about where his wife was returning from that fateful day, he had surmised that perhaps she had taken a detour to the market to shop for something for their daughter's upcoming 17th birthday. And maybe she had liked something, but wanted to discuss with her husband before buying the gift. Raj wasn't quite sure what had prevented him from sharing his suspicions with the police that his wife was probably having an affair and was returning from a rendezvous with the other man. It was probably as a token of respect for their 18-year-old marriage and consideration for their daughter that Raj had kept his suspicions to himself. With rapt attention, Raj watched the curve of the river, hugging the road, and the familiar city roads zipping past the fast-moving vehicle. As he expected, the car moved through the South City Market and towards the residential area next to it. Mira parked the car behind a dented Mahindra XUV 500 parked in the parking space and stepped out with her purse over her shoulder. She rummaged through her purse for something, and apparently not finding it in there, she leaned into the car, opened the glove compartment, and extracted a pepper spray. With the pepper spray ensconced in her purse, she marched to the front door and rang the bell. The pepper spray confused Raj. If she was going to meet her lover, he'd have expected her to be rummaging in her purse for something other than a pepper spray. The heavy brown door was opened by a balding man with horn-rimmed glasses on his nose. Mr. Sehgal, Hina's physics teacher? Was Mira having an affair with him? She detested the man and had even argued with him over some marks after the first term examination results. Nothing made sense. The man's face deflated on seeing the visitor. Raj thought Sehgal looked shocked to the point of being afraid on seeing Mira. Surprised? Said Mira. Why? Were you expecting my daughter? I don't know what you're talking about, the man stammered. I know you've been having a romantic relationship with my underage daughter. The man inhaled deeply. I have no idea what you're talking about. I have proof. Those letters you wrote to her. I found them, and I immediately knew they weren't written by a boy, but by a grown-up man. How could you do this? You're at least 50 years old. You disgust me. The man's nostrils flared with fury. Listen, you can't come to my doorstep and accuse me of something I haven't done. You need to leave, he said, beginning to close the door. Mira's ring-studded hand stopped the door from closing. I am leaving, but not before I warn you to stay away from my daughter. If you try to talk to her outside the class again, I'm going to inform the police. The only reason I haven't already contacted them is that Hina begged me. She begged me to let it go, and... Mira paused. The man was peering from behind the half-closed door with his narrowed eyes. And what? Mira sighed deeply. And nothing. I'm not calling the police right now because of my husband, who is ill. I don't want him to know about this mess. But if you contact my daughter again, I'll have no option but to call the police. Raj's world was spinning around him. So this was what the mother-daughter arguments were about. Now that he realized what had happened, it made perfect sense. Why then had his mind jumped to the conclusion that his wife was cheating on him, and the reason Hina was arguing with her mother was that she had somehow found out about her mother's affair? How could he have been so naive to jump to a disturbing conclusion based on a mere happenstance? The only thing Mira was trying to do was protecting their daughter from the pedophile and protecting her sick husband from the stress of the situation. The sudden onset of guilt at suspecting his innocent wife of cheating on him and violating her privacy made Raj sick in his stomach, having half a mind to close the laptop screen. Raj continued watching what was probably the last hour of his late wife's life. Soon, she would be on her way back home, and her Ford Endeavor would be hit on the rear by a vehicle that would send her spinning towards the river and to her death. Things seemed to be moving in slow motion as Mira delivered the final threat to the physics teacher, and leaving him with his jaw hanging, reversed her car out of the driveway, turning around towards her home. As she drove on the highway next to the river, Raj kept his gaze on her rearview mirror, his heart racing. If he was lucky, he'd be able to view the plate number of the vehicle that had hit his wife's car and hand over the evidence to the police. With his heart in his throat, Raj watched several large vehicles on the highway approaching his wife's car, and some of them overtaking it. Resisting an urge to tightly shut his eyes, Raj continued watching the last few minutes of his wife's life. What must be going on in her mind at the time, he wondered. He regretted not telling his wife how much he loved her and how much he appreciated her supporting the family, especially since he had lost his job. He regretted every harsh word he had said to his wife, every missed opportunity to appreciate her, each occasion he could have been kinder to her. Thinking of their arguments, and every time he had raised his voice at her, made him burn with shame. Was this his punishment for not living a purposeful life, for not living deliberately, but just drifting along the currents of everyday life? Raj sat bolt upright as he saw a vehicle he recognized approach his wife's car from behind. This couldn't be right. Why was the man following her? Raj knew the answer to the question a split second before he saw Segal ram his Mahindra XUV 500 into his wife's car and send her spinning towards the river. Water engulfed the world around him, and he saw the bubbles of air escaping his wife's mouth and nose as the water pressure shattered the windows and rushed into the rapidly sinking car, drowning its only occupant. At some point in time, the glasses drifted away from Mira's face, and through the camera, Raj saw his wife's face for the very last time. Some of the guilt that Raj felt for violating his wife's privacy was washed away with the knowledge that he now had the evidence to bring his wife's murderer to justice. Wiping the tears from his eyes, Raj closed the video file and picked up the phone to dial the police. Sins and sinners. Secrets carry weight like lead. Iris inhaled the pleasant air, which was ripe with the dewy petrichor of the post-rain evening. A cool breeze ruffled the leaves of nearby lofty mango trees, all of which were well endowed with succulent yellow mangoes. The sky was shades of pretty pink and purple pastels, making her way down the narrow path between the tall trees. She recollected her memories with Dante, Isabel, Rhett, and Jax, running along the shore, pushing each other in the sea, and dreaming about sailing the world one day. They would stand and watch the sea crash onto the shore for hours, and it'd still never be enough. She remembered standing on the cliff with her friends, and taking in the salty sea breeze. When the sun would set, the vast body of water would reflect the warm colors of the endless sky, and there hadn't ever been a more beautiful sight. She'd gaze at it for hours, fantasizing about unending aspirations and dreams. Iris traced the carvings on the trees she used to very much enjoy making, with scraps of metal and pieces of wood she mysteriously found every day. She suspected it was Jack's, always doing these little things for her that could brighten her day. He could rarely say no to her, which led to them being part of quite questionable activities. She'd once said that she wanted to visit the yearly carnival on her birthday, and the next day she found the gleaming golden entry tickets of the carnival on her bed. She didn't really question where he got the tickets from, since they cost a lot, and he wasn't from a rich family. But she did remember him mentioning a friend who owed him a favor. Isabella and Rhett had been so jealous that day. Iris giggled, recalling the look on their faces as she ventured further on the narrow path between the tall trees. The pastel-colored sky started to fade away into the dark shadows, from dusty lilac to indigo, and from indigo to inky black. A cool breeze blew, ruffling the leaves of the nearby mango trees, which were swaying to the notes of the wind. Iris shuddered, feeling the wind on the bare skin of her arms. She had half a mind to spend the whole night there, but even she knew it wasn't the best decision to invite the dangers lurking in the dark. Too lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice where she was keeping her foot. Instead of stepping on the hard rocks and stones, she stepped on the muddy soil. Her eyes went wide as she tried to grab a stray branch in hopes of regaining her balance. But down went she, and the stray branch with a thud. Dear Lord, things just can't go right for too long, is it? Iris internally screamed. Holding on to the bark of a nearby tree, she got back up on her feet with much difficulty and brushed off the dirt from her limbs. She looked up at the night sky, where millions of stars were in close clusters. But the full moon blazing in the sky was even more beautiful than the stars around. She smiled as she thought of the days she and her friends used to gaze at the moon together and talk about a fictional world that was everyone's personal paradise. Sadly, growing up had burst her bubble of believing that she could ever live in a place where the sky met the seas. With a sigh, she looked at the rich brown soil, padding around to look for her phone. Walking around in the mud, leaving her footprints behind, she heard a satisfying crunch. A shiver ran down her spine, and she visibly shuddered. Believing that the sound was of her own footstep, Iris took a step backward and crouched down. She started digging around in that area, throwing away the twigs, leaves, and lumps of soil she came across, till she felt something papery. Scrunching her brows, She pulled up the small piece of paper from the ground and held it in her hands. The paper was tattered and torn from the edges and dust-laden with a tint of yellowish tan. She blew air onto it and wiped off the remaining dirt on her white blouse, leaving behind an unlovely stain. It's not like it is clean anymore, to begin with, Iris huffed. Squinting her eyes and looking closely at the paper, she realized it was a photograph of a younger version of Rhett, Jax, Isabella, and herself. Huge grins showing their crooked teeth and resting their arms on each other's necks. Those wonderful memories came rushing back to her. But the small smile on her face vanished as she remembered how her wonderful childhood had a terrible turn of events. Chartusa. Rhett had always been the golden child in their circle. However, he did have a mean streak to him. Envy rolled off him whenever someone else outdid him. Over the years, harmless cursing turned into aggressive shoving, pushing, and malevolent acts driven by hostility. He was at the point where he used to be jealous even when Jax, Isabella, and Iris used to hang out in pairs sometimes. Isabella called it a phase of extreme insecurity. Perhaps he felt that his friends wouldn't want to hang out with him if he wasn't the best. Perhaps he believed the quote, "Either you're something or you are nothing at all," a bit too much. Nonetheless, whatever it wasn't going to end well for him if he didn't change his unpleasant behavior. She'd contemplated on staying away from Rhett, but Isabella told her that they wouldn't want his situation to worsen. She had reluctantly agreed. After a few days, Rhett's birthday arrived. Isabella had decided to throw him a surprise party that would cheer him up. Iris and Jax helped her decorate, and all of them awaited Rhett's grand arrival. Grand was an understatement. Rhett had arrived, reeking of strong alcohol, ignoring the presence of Isabella and Iris. He headed straight towards Jax and held him by his collar. His lips curled in disgust as he uttered some unmentionable words. Processing the enormity of what just happened, the girls ran towards Rhett to pull him away from Jax. But Rhett already managed to land a punch on the poor guy's face, escaping the grip of Isabella and Iris. He kept on punching Jax till his knuckles were bloody. Horrified, Iris grabbed the nearest object which she could find, which turned out to be an iron-made decor, and slammed it against Rhett's head. Ceasing his torture on Jax, he brought his hand towards his bleeding head and caught a few drops of blood on his fingertips. He felt lightheaded as black spots started appearing in front of his eyes in the cold silence that followed. All of them could almost hear Rhett's last heartbeats as he closed his eyes, took his final breath, and fell on the floor with a loud thud. gone. Isabella broke the silence, her eyes void of any emotion. I'm sure he's in a better place now. Isabella continued, after no one spoke a word. What have I done? Whispered Iris, tears threatening to come out of her eyes. It still seemed unreal. You did what was right. You ended his reign of terror. Best he be dead than alive, Jax said, anger evident in his tone as he looked at the ghoulish body of his once best friend. Why did he do that to you? Did something happen between you two? Iris asked Jax. Not receiving a response, she prompted again. Answer me, Jax. I can't live with the guilt, but at least I'll die peacefully, knowing that what I've done was for the right reason. Did he need a reason any longer to punch the shit out of his friends? Said Jax. What happened between you two? She asked for the second time. Stop asking that question again and again, Jax said, his teeth grinding together. Why? Don't you realize what has just happened? How can you be so... Iris was at a loss for words. You know that's a bloody problem of yours. All you and your selfish nature do is present yourself as the victim. Stop making everything about you, Iris. Stop pressuring me. And it's you who has killed him, not us. Oh, so I should have let him beat you to death, is it? That would have been better than this, said Jax, his eyes icy as he stomped away, as if her soul could bleed an ocean through the eyes. That was the enormity of Iris's sobbing. Isabella hugged her, slowly rocking her body as if she was a little child. Iris, he didn't mean any of that. He is just upset. Anyone would have felt that way, I'm sure. What you did, it wasn't wrong. It was inevitable. You freed him from the evil inside, consoled Isabella, who had been quiet all this long. How do you even understand 1% of what we're feeling anyway? You didn't do any of this. Iris laughed humorlessly. Rhett was the closest to you than any of us. Didn't you consider him your friend? Don't you feel the least sad about it? You don't seem to be grieving at all. Just because I don't express it does not mean I don't feel it. And Rhett was as much of a friend to me as he was to the rest of us. Would you rather he attain peace through death, or rather he continue inflicting violence and chaos on us? Iris didn't say anything afterward. The weight of the guilt was heavy. Despair was a crushing force on her chest, constricting her breath and coloring the world around her. Black as she too was slowly engulfed by the darkness. That is exactly how a tragedy like theirs breaks one's heart, making one believe that the ending might still be happy until the very last minutes. Iris flipped the photograph, returning to the present day, and read the words she had written a long time ago. Which of us could say we were more sinned against than sinning? Thoughts kill. I held in my cough as I entered the bathroom, senses already on high alert, smoke unfurled around. blinding me for a moment. It took a second to gauge my surroundings, but once I had, it came as no surprise to see my older brother standing in their group. The only boy in here. After all, this was a ladies' bathroom. I watched in the mirror as the cigarette got passed around. A girl with pouting lips, caked in maroon lipstick, passed it to my brother. His lazy smile at her and the smoke around were in competition to make me nauseous. A familiar bubble of bile arose in my throat as he puffed out carbon monoxide. I clenched my nostril muscles, focusing on fixing my hair in the bathroom mirror. Luckily for me, I hadn't been spotted yet. They all started laughing as he did some kind of trick with the smoke. My eyes were so narrowed now, I could hardly see out of them. Once my hair was done, I walked over to the door, palm raised to open it. When a girl's voice said, "It's coming tomorrow," my brother's voice answered, "The LSD?" "Shut up!" the girl barked, leaving the bathroom deathly silent. I felt his eyes on my back before I saw them. Next thing I knew, I was slammed into the bathroom wall, inches from a familiar face. His lip curled. "Hello, sister." "Your sister?" the girl asked. She better not be a snitch. My brother didn't answer. I took refuge in the fact that I knew secrets of his that he'd rather die than let his friends know. Or that I knew he still had nightmares about Dad. Or that he used his blanket as a tissue for his snotty nose. His breath steamed on the mirror next to my head as he leaned in harder, earning a yelp from me as I felt his shirt button press in. "Don't let me find you in here again." I arched an eyebrow in response, trying to mask the turmoil inside. "LSD? No way." "Oh, brother, should I tell them?" He read all his secrets on my face. "Go to hell," he snarled. I held out my hand in answer. He looked ready to spit on me as he pulled out a $5 from his pocket. I shook my head with a smile. He took out another. I took the money from him, squirmed out from the bathroom, and contemplated calling Mom. I knew Caleb drug dealt, but this? Everyone knew it never stopped at Cigarette Doll. It had only been a matter of time, and that night, I gave the money to Mom with a too bright smile. "You know, honey, I don't need a commission from the money you earn. The job pays well, Mom," I said with a shrug, the lie spilling from my mouth like silk. She gave me a side hug, then carried on with her work. I lingered for a moment, at odds on whether I should tell her. But when I saw her eyebrows sink into a furrow, her lips into a frown, I decided that she had enough on her plate. When the front door slammed, indicating my brother was home from God knows where, neither my mom nor I left our rooms to greet him. The ritual had been long gone since Dad had left. Well, Dad's hello was more actions than words to Caleb. I can't deny that I hadn't felt the want to stop him all the time. Hearing his footsteps outside my door, a feeling of hate so red clouded my mind that I found it hard to breathe. Mum was at the epicenter of it all. Her money had all been stolen by him for the drugs he was addicted to, then played off as a fraud. I was simply recycling the money back to the owner. It was tough falling asleep that night, knowing I couldn't stop what was going to happen tomorrow. But even if I could, I wouldn't. I wanted him to hit rock bottom. That was the only hope for change for him. And maybe that made me a sucky person. Hell, the worst person. But it's what he deserved in my eyes. The pain I saw flit on my mother's eyes when he'd come home drunk a few weeks ago was enough to make my fiery personality want to put a bullet through his heart. I avoided that bathroom at all costs on Tuesday. There was no way I'd be near choked again. I'd had to cover the bruises from yesterday up with a woolen scarf. In summer, I looked like a right idiot. School went smoothly. Well, as smoothly as a high school day in America can possibly go. And then I was home. I put my phone on DND, the thoughts running through my mind, demanding instant attention. Being home alone was one of my favorite things. Just my mind and I. I sat on my windowsill, watching the city below me. There was something so serene in feeling the wind play on your face, to be isolated, but to also see hundreds of people below you, hustling around. I wonder if this is how God feels. I don't know how long I sat there for, but when I next opened my eyes, the sky was pitch black, and the city was now bustling with partygoers, dressed in sparkling dresses, with equally shiny champagne glasses in hand. I quickly climbed inside, wondering why my mum hadn't called for me yet. But then I heard a noise from her room. I hadn't realized how tight my chest had gotten, but it loosened as I felt her presence in the house. Caleb wasn't home yet. "Mom?" I asked, tentatively pushing her door open with a toe. I got a shock when I saw her bloodshot eyes turn up to look at me, tears streaming down and mixing with her mascara. I rushed to her side. "Mom? What's wrong?" I asked, a little forcefully, the panic already rising. Her eyes held mine as she whispered the words I thought I'd never hear. "Caleb is dead. Chad." The phone finally rang. It had been 5 days. The investigators said they'd call once they found out what had happened. LSD doesn't kill, I murmured to myself, over and over. But it doesn't change the fact of what happened. "Hello?" I answered, words tasting weird on my mouth after not talking for nearly a week. "Is your mother there?" I passed the phone to my already crying mom, leaning in to listen over her shoulder. I only got bits and pieces. 5 minutes later, my mother put down the phone, hand still trembling. "It wasn't LSD. He didn't take LSD. So he took something else?" She shook her head, her throat bobbing as she swallowed a sob. "The supplier sold them a synthetic drug as LSD. I had one goal. One. To put that supplier behind bars for the rest of his life. Maybe that would take away the guilt that I practically killed my own brother. Cia Reyes. Murder case. The doorbell chime filled the anxiety-spilt air. Clemency and I both exchanged nervous looks. We both knew who it was. I walked up to the door while she arranged a few drinks. "Oh, welcome, Mr. Wright. Please take a seat." I greeted the young man. He was wearing a blue suit and tie, left parted hair, and a shaved beard. Mr. Wright sat comfortably on the foam, glaring at the drinks in front of him, but did not dare to have one. "So you're Clemency Cook?" he asked, cocking a brow towards me. I left a foolish chuckle and pointed at Clemency. "No, she is." The lawyer's balls danced from me to Clemency's face while she stood near the dining table, trying hard not to blush. After all, Mr. Wright was a handsome youth. Mr. Wright adjusted his collars and asked Clemency to sit in front of him. He cleared his throat and began. "Your name is Clemency Bailey Cook, am I right?" "Yes, sir." The gentleman forwarded his hand and was replied with a firm shake of Clemency's. "My name is Ian Wright, senior lawyer from Rake Walkers. Am I right that you saw, He glanced at some papers and continued. "Cia Reyes being brutally murdered in front of your eyes?" "Yes, sir." "When did this happen?" "Around 1 a.m. on August 21st. What were you doing at such an odd time at Chargine Road, Memphis?" Clemency pressed her lips into a thin line and looked at me. I signaled her to spill the truth. The night before, my boyfriend broke up with me. So in tears and scars, I decided to hit the club. On my way back, I saw, you know, Ian nodded, as if he had gone through the same and understood her pain. "Would you like to give some details?" I could tell Clemency was not liking this. She never wanted to see the lawyer. It was me who pushed her. As a responsible citizen, and of course, when you are innocent, you should not fear to reach the hands of laws. It is for the betterment of all. Clemency took a deep breath and said, "I was all head over heels with wine and was fumbling through the dark streets when I saw them, harshly stabbing the teen, while her screams echoed all around the place. The murderers saw me, but I was drunk, so they might not have expected me to remember anything. But that's what makes me different. No matter how unconsciously befuddled I am, I remember everything." Mr. Wright bent a bit forward. His eyes sparkled a doubtful glint. "Do you remember the Terminator's face?" "Yes, but I didn't know who it was." Ian took out some inked photos from his bag and displayed them all together, like a pack of cards. "Any one of these?" Clemency thought for a second, biting her lips when she finally pointed at a man's photo, disguised in a scruffy beard and smooth eyes. He wore dazzling spectacles and a cowboy hat. Hard to believe he was cruel enough to cut his employer's salary. Murder was far off. "Just one," Ian said, analyzing the chosen photo. "No, there were two. But you only have one man's photo. Okay, we will work that out. Ian turned towards me and said, "Bring this lady to the court tomorrow. She will be a powerful witness." I nodded my head in agreement and waved the officer goodbye. After a few hugs and words of appreciation to Clemency, I walked the way to my house. "I'll pick you up tomorrow for the trial." My last words read, "Chanta. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Calling the case of the murder of Sia Reyes versus Charles Young. Are both sides ready?" The judge's thundering voice alarmed all the ears. I have never been in a trial before, so it was all new. "Yes, my honor," came a reply from Ian and his opposition. "Your honor, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant has been charged with the crime of murdering a 17-year-old girl named Sia Reyes from St. Crim's School in the middle of the Sharjah Road, Memphis, on August 21st. Your honor, I would like to call my first witness, Alice Reyes, elder sister of Sia Reyes, for a few questions." "Let Alice Reyes be presented in the court," the judge announced, thumping his gavel on the wood. Alice Reyes gets presented. I am so sorry about your loss, Miss Reyes. As per my information, you live with your..." He gets uncomfortable for a second, but hides it with a cough. "Late sister and your mother, about 60 kilometers from Sharjah Road. Am I correct?" "Yes," came a sore voice from her throat. "What made her go to the Sharjah Road?" She got a call in the middle of the night from his friend Charles Young, saying he had met with an accident and needed immediate help, and he did not know who else to call." Ian turned towards the judge and said, "My lord, as you can see, Sia was cleverly trapped into coming to the Sharjah Road with a 60-kilometer drive without giving it a second thought." "Objection, my lord," came a voice from the lawyer in defense. "Objection sustained," said the judge. The person in opposition stood up and said, "My honor, my client, Charles Young, did not call Sia Reyes in the middle of the night. They have not been in contact for a couple of days now. Here is the call, History of Sia Reyes," handing the bailiff the proof. The judge nodded as he went through the papers. "My lord, I would like to call my other witness, Miss Clemency Cook, through which it would be clear that Mr. Young was involved in the murder," Ian said. "Let Clemency Cook be presented in the court," the judge repeated, hammering his gavel. I was sitting among the public, and I could feel the environment tense. A small smirk played on Ian's face. "So, Ms. Clemency, were you present on the Sharjah Road around 1 a.m. on 21st August? "Yes," Clemency replied. I could feel every nerve in my body jolt up. I was really getting excited. Now that famous Charles gotta get infamous. I felt my blood screaming yuppie from the inside. It feels so good when guilty people get punished. Did you see Charles Young brutally murder Sia Reyes? Everybody's brows lifted up at the second. No, I did not see anything except a lifeless body lying in the middle of the street. I was left shaken. Ian and I glanced at each other in shock. What? But during our discussion, you said, Ian tried to protest. Enough. Any other points from any side? The judge yawped. The court fell silent. The gavel declared the adjournment of the court, leaving everyone standing in their seats, ready to get out of the courtroom. Clemency was smart to get out fast, but I caught her arm just in time and pulled her in a corner. What was that? Why did you lie? I said, trying to keep my voice low, but my temper was breaking its bounds. What? Oh, right. Listen, girl, you're too innocent for this world. This world runs on money. I got paid for it. Now get lost. I have other work to do. A new voice inside of Clemency spoke. I couldn't believe she just said that, uprooting all my faith in law and humanity in just a couple of seconds. My eyes fell on Alice, who was staring at me as Clemency walked away. I was too shattered to face her. All I could do was mouth, I am sorry. Thank you, everyone, for reading my story. I have never really attended any court session or have any idea how it works. It is based upon my understanding on basis of bits of information from movies and series. Please forgive me if my context is not similar to the actual process. Regards, Kea.